I was halfway through my second cappuccino when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me mid-sip. Mitchell and Avery Enterprises. I leaned back in my chair, letting the soft silk of my ivory blouse settle against my skin. Outside my 34th floor office window, the Manhattan skyline glimmered under a crisp winter sun. I could hear the faint hum of the city below, taxis honking, life rushing forward, but inside my glass-walled corner office, everything felt still. It had been years since I'd spoken to anyone from that company. Years since they'd rolled their eyes, smirked, and called my idea a cute little hobby. A side hustle. I set my cappuccino down, tracing a finger over the warm porcelain. My mind flickered back to their voices, dripping with condescension, as if my dream was nothing but a punchline. I remember smiling politely back then, even as my cheeks burned.
Now?
They were asking for a meeting. Urgent, the email said. My assistant, Claire, poked her head in. They want to come in today. Said it's important. I smiled, slow, deliberate. Book them for 3 o'clock, I said. Claire tilted her head, curious. Should I prepare a portfolio? No need, I replied, standing to smooth my blazer. They'll see everything they need to see. I turned toward the window, the skyline reflecting faintly in the glass. Somewhere down there, they were rushing over, thinking they were about to save themselves. They had no idea whose office they were walking into. 5 years ago, I was sitting in the cramped break room of Mitchell and Avery, clutching a styrofoam cup of stale coffee, like it was the only thing holding me together. I had just pitched my idea during the quarterly meeting, a small online platform selling curated, handmade wellness products from independent creators. I'd spent weeks preparing the proposal, late nights at my kitchen table in my tiny Brooklyn apartment, research notes scattered between empty takeout boxes. When I finished speaking, there was a beat of silence. Then, the laughter started. Mitchell, tall, silver-haired, the kind of man who spoke in boardroom cliches, leaned back in his chair and said, Emily, that's adorable. But let's stay focused on real business opportunities. Avery, never one to miss a chance to twist the knife, smirked. Maybe you could do it on weekends? A fun little side hustle. Something to keep you busy. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, my pulse thudding in my ears. My hands trembled so badly, I had to grip my coffee cup with both. I wanted to defend myself, to explain why this could work, but the lump in my throat made words impossible. The meeting moved on, as if my idea had never existed. I sat there, swallowing humiliation with every bitter sip. That night, I called my grandmother, Margaret. She'd always been the one person who believed in me without question. I told her everything, my voice cracking. She listened quietly, then said, Honey, don't give them the satisfaction of stopping you. Build it quietly. Let success do the talking. Before we hung up, she said, I'm mailing you something. 2 days later, a small box arrived. Inside was her old gold compass, the one she used to carry when she traveled in her younger years. On the back, she'd engraved 3 words, Find your north. I wore it around my neck every day after that. It wasn't just a necklace. It was a promise. A week later, I handed in my resignation. No big announcement, no dramatic speech. Just a quiet, steady decision. Mitchell barely looked up from his laptop when I dropped my notice on his desk. Good luck with whatever that little project was, he said, already dismissing me with a wave. I walked out of that building with my heart pounding, the compass warm against my chest. I didn't have a plan for how I'd succeed. I just knew I would. The first 6 months were brutal. I worked out of a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens, my office crammed into the corner between the kitchen counter and my couch. The smell of coffee was always in the air, half from the mug in my hand, half from the ancient drip machine sputtering in the background. During the day, I took on freelance marketing gigs to keep the lights on. At night, I built my platform, sourcing products, negotiating with artisans, learning everything I could about e-commerce. I taught myself web design from YouTube tutorials, squinting at my laptop until my eyes burned. Some nights, I'd collapse into bed at 3 a.m., only to wake up 4 hours later to start again. The compass my grandmother had given me hung on a hook above my desk. Every time exhaustion made me question what I was doing, I glance at it and remember her words. Find your north. My first real break came when I met Rachel Porter, a seasoned entrepreneur who ran a small but thriving eco-friendly brand. She'd stumbled across my fledgling site, placed a small wholesale order, and then called me directly. You've got something here, she said. You just need to scale it and stop thinking small. Rachel became my informal mentor. She introduced me to suppliers, taught me how to negotiate without apologizing, and reminded me that saying no was just as important as saying yes. Sales started to climb, slowly at first, then in sharper leaps. My first $1,000 profit felt like winning the lottery. My first $10,000 month left me staring at my bank app in disbelief, wondering if it was a glitch. Still, I kept my success quiet. On social media, I posted vague updates, a latte here, a bookshelf there. I didn't want anyone, especially Mitchell and Avery, to know what I was building. Let them think I'd disappeared into obscurity. By year 2, I'd moved operations into a small warehouse space in Long Island City. By year 3, we were shipping nationwide, and a handful of luxury wellness brands had reached out, asking to be featured on my platform. That's when the first major press mention happened. A glossy lifestyle magazine called us a rising star in the wellness market. Orders doubled overnight. I remember sitting in that warehouse, surrounded by boxes, laughing to myself until I cried. Through it all, I stayed cautious. Every contract was read twice, every dollar reinvested carefully. I remembered the smirks, the dismissive tone, and I promised myself I'd never give anyone the power to belittle me again. By year 4, my company, North & Company, was profitable enough to attract acquisition offers. I turned them all down. I wasn't building something to sell. I was building something to last. And then, one crisp November morning, my accountant called with the news that made me freeze mid-step in my warehouse office. Emily, you realize your company's valuation just surpassed Mitchell and Avery's, right? I remember gripping the compass around my neck, the metal warm from my skin. I had found my north. 3 o'clock sharp, the elevator doors opened with a muted chime. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Manhattan office, hands folded loosely in front of me, watching the city stretch endlessly below. Claire greeted them at the reception desk and led them in. Mitchell came first, still tall, but with deeper lines etched into his face. Avery followed, his once perfect hair now streaked with gray. They both wore the kind of strained smiles people use when they're pretending everything is fine. Emily, Mitchell said, extending his hand as if we'd been old friends. It's been too long. Has it? I asked, keeping my tone polite but cool. They glanced around the room. My office wasn't ostentatious, but every detail spoke quietly of success. Abstract art on the walls, a walnut conference table, a discreet espresso machine in the corner. The compass sat on my desk, its gold catching the afternoon light. Beautiful space, Avery said, eyes lingering on the panoramic view. Must be quite the rent. I smiled faintly. I manage. We sat at the conference table, and Mitchell cleared his throat. We'll be direct. Our company is in a difficult position. Market changes, supply chain issues, we're looking for strategic partnerships to keep operations going. I let the silence stretch, watching them shift in their seats. Avery leaned forward. Your business, North & Company, right? It's got a strong brand presence. We think a merger could be mutually beneficial. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. A merger? Well, Mitchell said slowly, more of an acquisition. You acquire us. We retain certain leadership roles, of course, but your capital and market share would stabilize both companies. I rested my hands on the table. So, you want me to buy Mitchell and Avery? They exchanged a glance. That's the idea, Mitchell said. For a moment, I simply looked at them, letting the weight of it hang in the air. Then I leaned back, the leather chair creaking softly. Do you remember? I began, 5 years ago, when I pitched you an idea for a curated wellness platform? Mitchell's jaw tightened. Avery's gaze flicked away. You laughed, I continued. Told me it was a cute little hobby. Suggested I do it on weekends for fun. Neither of them spoke. That hobby, now has a valuation higher than your company's. I could buy you out today without blinking. Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. Emily, business is business. That was condescension, I said evenly. That was you underestimating me. And now you're sitting in my office, asking me to save you. I stood and walked to my desk, picking up the compass. When you dismissed me, I decided I'd never give anyone the chance to belittle me again. I built North and Company from scratch, no investors, no shortcuts. And I didn't forget who told me it couldn't be done. When I turned back, their expressions were a mix of shock, shame, and reluctant respect. I will consider your proposal, I said finally. But on my terms. No retained leadership roles. You step down completely. And every single employee you've overlooked or undervalued gets a raise. Mitchell's lips parted, but no words came. Avery's shoulders sagged. I walked them to the door. As the elevator opened, I said, "Oh, and one more thing. When the announcement goes public, it will read, North and Company acquires Mitchell and Avery. No mention of a merger. Clear?" Mitchell gave a stiff nod. Avery didn't meet my eyes. The door slid shut, and the soft hum of the elevator faded. I returned to my desk, set the compass back in its place, and smiled. The girl with this side hustle had just bought their empire. The following week, we met again, this time in the boardroom of Mitchell and Avery's headquarters. It felt strange, walking into the same building where I'd once sat in that cramped break room, clutching stale coffee and swallowing humiliation. Now, the receptionist greeted me by name, and the double glass doors to the executive floor opened with a quiet click. Mitchell and Avery were already seated at the far end of the table when I arrived. Their legal team was present, but subdued. I took my place at the head of the table, a symbolic choice I didn't bother to hide. "I've reviewed the numbers," I began, sliding a thin folder across the polished mahogany. "North and Company will move forward with the acquisition. But there are conditions." Avery's jaw tightened. "We're listening." "First," I said, "you both resign. Effective immediately. No advisory roles, no honorary titles. You walk away clean." Mitchell's brow furrowed. "Emily Shirley. This isn't negotiable," I said, my tone even. "Second, every current employee receives a salary review. Anyone underpaid gets an increase to industry standard or above. Effective within 60 days. One of the lawyers glanced at them, hesitant. "That will be costly." "I can afford it," I said simply. "Third," I continued, "the toxic office culture ends. No more dismissing junior employees in meetings. No more closed-door decisions that leave people blindsided. North and Company runs on collaboration and respect, and that's the culture we're bringing here." Mitchell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Avery stared at the table. "And lastly," I said, leaning forward, "you issue a public statement about the acquisition that includes an acknowledgement of my leadership and the company's vision. Not just a line in a press release, a full statement." Mitchell let out a slow breath. "Is this about revenge?" I considered his question for a moment. "No. It's about correction. It's about making sure the people you left behind get what they deserve, and that the next woman who walks into this boardroom with an idea doesn't get laughed out of it." Silence hung in the air. Avery finally spoke. "You've built something remarkable, Emily. I misjudged you." I met his eyes. "You underestimated me. There's a difference." We moved into the signing portion of the meeting. Pens scratched across paper. Documents slid from one side of the table to the other. With each signature, the shift in power became more real. When the last page was signed, I stood. "Gentlemen, you're officially free to enjoy early retirement. I hear Florida's nice this time of year." Mitchell's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but not resentment either. "Good luck, Emily." I nodded. "I don't need luck. I have direction." As I left the building, I passed several employees I remembered from my time there. Some gave me curious looks, others small, hopeful smiles. They didn't know it yet, but their working lives were about to change. And this time, it would be for the better. 2 months later, the press release went out. North and Company. acquires Mitchell and Avery Enterprises. The statement included exactly what I demanded: public acknowledgement of my leadership, the company's new culture, and a commitment to supporting emerging entrepreneurs. The photo accompanying it showed me standing at the head of the boardroom table, compass necklace glinting under the lights. The day it went live, I received dozens of emails from former colleagues and industry contacts. Some congratulated me. Others apologized for not believing in me. A few were from women I'd never met, telling me my story gave them courage to pursue their own ideas. Inside the company, the changes had begun. The salary adjustments were complete. Meetings felt different, quieter at first, as people adjusted to being heard without fear. One junior designer told me she'd pitched an idea in front of the whole team, and, for the first time, no one interrupted her. It wasn't perfect. Change never is. But the ground was shifting in the right direction. One Friday evening, after the office had emptied, I stayed behind. I walked through the quiet halls of what used to be Mitchell and Avery, now officially part of North and Company. The walls that once held the sound of laughter at my expense now echoed with something else: possibility. I stepped into my office and sat at the desk. The city was glowing outside, lights stretching out to the horizon. I reached for the compass, holding it in my palm. The engraving on the back was smooth under my thumb. Find your north. I thought about the scared young woman in that break room 5 years ago, hands shaking, throat tight, told to keep her dreams small. I wished I could tell her then what I knew now, that the mockery didn't matter, that the dismissal would become fuel, and that one day she'd walk back into this building not as an employee, but as the owner. I smiled, slipping the necklace back around my neck. The compass settled against my skin, warm and steady, like it had been waiting for this moment. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so solid, so unshakable, that the people who doubted you have no choice but to stand in awe. I leaned back in my chair, the city lights reflecting in the glass, and let the satisfaction wash over me. "I've found my north," I whispered. And I wasn't about to lose it.